It's time to get your property news, tips, and tricks from a different pro every week. I'm Todd Sloan, and you're listening to Pizza and Property. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. You are listening to the Pizza and Property podcast. Tuned into this episode today. Oh yeah, I'm your host, Todd Sloan. I should say that bit as well. But today, we're going to be giving you guys exactly what you've asked for. More of investor stories, more of just real people without anything else to attach to it. I've got someone today in the show that has been a dear friend of mine. Well, I don't want to give him a big head. Let's just say a friend of mine for a very long time, Mr. James Rodriguez. Now, this man has been on the show before, actually. He co-hosted me the very first time. I think this is actually when we talked to Damien Cooley, I'm pretty sure. And it was the first time I was about to start hosting this myself. And I was like, I can't do that myself. And James was like, I'll come on the show. And he's not a property guy the same way. Like, he has one investment property, which is what we're going to be talking to him about today. But this is exactly why I wanted him on the show. This is someone that doesn't work in the industry. He does have a bit of a background in the lending scene, but otherwise, he's in drinks manufacturing. Actually, if you guys are into like healthy tonics, he manufactures this drink called Jamu. Check it out online from Dirty Clean Eats. But that's a whole nother subject. And that's not a paid presentation either. I'm just saying it because I actually love the drink that he makes. But James has purchased a unit years and years ago, back in, we're going to go into that with him. But recently done a renovation, and he asked me, he took me out for a coffee the other day. When I say the other day, that's any time between like now and 12 months ago. So it's probably about like 8 months ago now. He's like, what should I do? Should I sell it? Should I keep it? Should I renovate it? And we went through all of these different options together. And it turns out he was like, no, I'm going to renovate it. This is what I'm going to do. And he went the whole hog. He ended up doing the bathroom, the kitchen, everything. And he has done tremendously well. Like, seriously proud of this guy, because this isn't what he lives and breathes. This isn't his passion. But this is why I wanted to share it with you, because right now, you that are listening, you might, maybe you've got 5-10 properties already, and it is what you live and breathe. This is still going to be a cool story that you can get some takeaways from. But maybe you're sitting on the train or in the car or wherever you are right now and going, you know what? Yeah, I don't have 10 properties. This isn't my passion. I'm new to this. How does someone that doesn't actually live it and breathe it and know everything inside and out actually pull off a successful renovation profitably and actually make money? And as you're about to find out, make a decent chunk of money as well. He hasn't just walked away with like a 10-20 grand profit. Even that would still be respectable. But yeah, James has done well out of this. So I'm super happy to share this episode with you guys today. We're going to be going through what he had to do to actually get the site, what the pitfalls were. We're going to be walking through this one as a project profiles episode. So we're going to be going through what he actually had to do to get the site, what he had to do for any kind of financing, what were the big pitfalls, what were the things that he actually learned from, what were the things he wouldn't do again, and how did all the numbers actually stack up on this one. I can probably stop talking now because James, naturally being one of my closest mates, he is in the studio with me right now. So we're not over the phone. But before we actually start chatting with him, just a very quick word from our sponsor. Buying a property in this hot market is already tough enough. Investing in one that actually hits all the right data points is an even bigger challenge. Arjun Paliwal from InvestorKit is always on the show giving away his knowledge. If you want to buy a solid investment, reach out to InvestorKit.com.au and support the agency that supports us here at Pizza and Property. You know how good this guy's free content is. Wait until you see what they're actually doing for clients on the inside. Check them out today at InvestorKit.com.au.
In the property investment space, there are those who do well with their projects and those that do not. These are their stories.
James Rodriguez, you are back again, mate. I want to say long time no see, but like I see you all the time, but long time no listen.
To be fair, you listen to me fairly regularly as well, just to throw you right off from the onset.
Well, yeah, I think I pretend to listen, but I guess I kind of listen to you.
Well, it's like I'm talking to myself. Oh, yeah. How have you been?
Yeah, been good, man. So last time you were on the show was, I think it was like episode 31, 32 with Damien Cooley.
What episode is this?
I think like 100 and something.
105.
It depends on when we actually air. So maybe.
It did say on the thing, it said date and episode.
There's also fine print underneath it on the invitation, just so everyone knows. Now, this is how
you
the
get an invitation.
Yeah, it actually says episode number and date of release may vary.
Yeah, and I looked at it. I'm like, yeah, 105 maybe. You thought I didn't read it.
But James,
in Todd's defense, I don't read things most of the time. So
you didn't click the link, but we won't talk about that. But
it's peanut butter jelly time. Anyway.
All right. So last time,
serious podcast.
Well, it is, and you were on the show about what was it? There was something to do with the yellow line with your apartment. Now you've done some renovations to that apartment since we last spoke, which is exactly why I wanted to chat with you on the show, because I think you've done a phenomenal job. And full disclosure, like James, you might be a super property person listening to this right now. You might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, whatever you've got. You might be at 0 and just wanting to learn the ropes. Now James is someone that has a property behind himself right now, but he's not. Like, you're not, would you call yourself like a property investor, a property person the same way?
It's not my primary priority. it just became one
Well,
for a little while this year.
And this is exactly why I wanted you on the show, because I think you've made a tremendous success with a property. Again, this isn't your forte. This isn't your main focus right now. It got chucked in the front seat and you did a really good job. So if you don't mind, can we start unpacking the project and I guess start pulling it apart, how it worked, what went wrong, what went right, and share it all with the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Cool.
let's do it.
All right. Well, let's start off with financing. How do you actually, so not financing, how do you actually secure the site? How did you get it in the first place?
So I bought this property about 6-ish years ago, and I bought it at the time every 12 to 18 months, going to live in it and renovate it for a while. And it just so happened that this year was the year where the stars aligned and I decided to do it. Well, and I still didn't do it in the capacity that I thought I was going to.
Well, and you and I spoke about this. It was, do you do a quick little tart up or do you go sort of all out and actually renovate it completely? What led you to? Because I was kind of trying to push you towards a little tart up if you weren't actually going to refinance. But what made you go like, no, let's go all the way?
There was a lot of factors. The market, for one, at the moment, it was one of those rewind 18, 24 months pre-COVID, and we were looking at, maybe it was going to be worth 300 grand or early threes as it was tidied up, and maybe mid threes if it was renovated. And things just sort of progressed as we started to do one thing. It was like, oh, well, the bathroom is pink and it's disgusting. So if we are going to do the bathroom up and tart it up, are we going to tile over the top? I'd already tried to paint the bath with the paint stuff that you get, which worked for about 6 months and then started chipping off.
On that then, do you mind if we actually unpack just before we get into the rest of it? What did you rush that? Did you follow the directions 100%?
Followed the directions 100%, and 90% of it was good for the first year and a half. And then as soon as it was around the drain hole, which I assume is, it's a break in the seal. That started to bubble a little bit. And as soon as that started, I don't think the bath got used very much, not for bathing in any way.
Okay.
It always just had junk in it.
Okay.
So that started to bubble up and then the whole lot just pretty much peeled off.
Right. Okay.
Bathtub was pretty much you could have used it as a bomb shelter though. That was one of the hardest things to get out of that.
Yeah, that's one of the old steel ones.
Yeah, it was a steel bath and she didn't want to come out of that wall. The joys. I'd forgotten about that until just then. I was like, oh, that's right. That was a horrible job.
How long did it take?
I honestly don't know.
But you're referring to the demo of physically removing it, yeah?
The bath, a couple of hours probably for just that bath off the, it was in there. She didn't want to come out because we'd knocked a wall out previously.
Yeah.
It was hard to explain, but the bath went up to a wall that we were knocking out. So that bit came out pretty easy. And I could see under the bath. I'm like, fantastic. Not fantastic. Hammer drill, crowbar, everything short of dynamite.
Okay. All right. So it was a little bit tricky to get out.
The drain was concreted into this. It was horrible.
Okay. So more than a little bit tricky to get out. Really tricky to get
out. I swore at that bathtub multiple times. I ended up, the last bit that I couldn't get out was the drain hole that was just it was old, it had corroded, it was, none of it wanted to move. And I ended up using, I managed to get a jimmy bar in to make a hole in the bottom of the bath. And then I used a reciprocating saw to cut around the drain hole so I could pull the whole bathtub out. And eventually it came out and then I just hammer drilled everything else.
Right.
It was,
I feel like we're skipping ahead a few questions. So I setbacks and all this kind of.
Yeah, but I hadn't even written that in setbacks. Setbacks was not too,
I'll turn your head. Don't say it yet. We're going to get
that's
to that
what I
bit.
didn't. I just looked at them. I'm like, oh yeah, significantly more work. Yeah.
Okay. So there was a lot of work that by the sound of things you weren't thinking was going to happen, but that's, I guess, renovating as well for most part of it. But what about the financing side of things? Was there anything creative that needed to be pulled together there when you actually secured it?
When I secured it, no, that was 6-7 years. Oh, actually, I used a family guarantee. So I had a deposit, but because the way lending was at the time, I feel like
we're talking 2015-ish.
Yeah. I'll tell you in a few weeks' time after I refinance, but I feel like it was a lot easier to get money from the banks back then. I certainly know from someone I know that wasn't me.
You can't wink on a video podcast.
I know. From someone that worked in finance, it wasn't that hard to get finance, but the more people I'm talking to now are saying how difficult it is to get finance. So
just for anyone wanting the rest of the dots connected there in that story, James used to work in finance. So he had a few extra connections on, I guess, what best ways to just get money, but you weren't a broker. You actually
I wasn't a broker. I worked for a financial institution and I just knew what we had. I knew what stuff we had in place and we were a conservative lender. So we were conservative and I knew what people were borrowing and how easy or difficult it it was. So then we'll see what happens. This refinance will be fun. That's a whole different podcast topic.
Okay. All right. So, but mum and dad helped out with this one. So they were going to it?
Yeah. I had the option to use my deposit or because I could do 100% loan with a family guarantee and keep all of my money to do the renovations that I was going to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I used a family guarantee, kept my money, and then, well, I've eventually done the renovation, but it certainly
7 years later, 6 years later?
Yeah, about that. 6
Okay.
or 7. It's been a while.
And so now with the equity uplift is part of the idea to be able to actually like release the guarantor.
Release that security, pull some equity out, and just leave it rented, basically.
Okay. Well, in terms of like the initial FISO time frame costings, what did all the numbers look like to begin with?
Really good. I'm an optimist. I hope for the best, and
how good's really good?
I hope for the best and plan for the best, which is apparently detrimental. So I sat down with a very close, trusted friend of mine who
that's me,
who knows a bit about renovating, and we somehow came up with the number of 2 weeks. We were like, oh yeah, we're going to do this in 2 weeks.
Wait a second. I never said 2 weeks.
2 weeks is what we were talking about.
No, that was for like the quick and dirty if you're just like painting and getting in and out, not if you're ripping out the entire kitchen bathroom.
Well, I plan for the best and I hope for the best and I hear what I want to hear. So in my head, we were like I thought 2 to 4 weeks. I thought like a month. Realistically, I should be able to get this done.
I remember you saying 6 weeks early on, because I remember saying to you, if you can do this in 6 weeks, like Karen Baldwin flips properties in like 6 weeks. So like that would be amazing if you can do that.
I remember that conversation. And when you told me that, I remember thinking, shit, if 6 weeks is how long professionals do it in, why did he tell me we could do it in 2?
Because I was talking about a different kind of reno.
You didn't specify. But anyway, so yeah, I grossly underestimated how long the process was going to take. And then I had fairly significant things happen in both of my businesses during that process, which just added to a few people in the last week have said like, oh, no, how are you? And I'm like, for the first time in 4 months, I am relieved because the property is done. It's ready to be rented out.
Yeah.
Minus filling that concrete hole, but that's bygones be bygones. That'll get done. But yeah, it is a relief to have it done because I've been that close for, it feels like 2 months.
Okay, so you're originally thinking around that kind of 6 weekish sort of time for the full thing.
Was my new optimistic goal.
And what did it actually end up taking you?
5 months, around 5 months. But to be fair, the last month I haven't really been there. So it was 4 months of fairly constant something always happening there, and then a month of just going backwards and forwards to do bits when I could.
And this is still in between like running the business. This isn't 4 or 5 months full time. No,
yeah. So this is 4 or 5 months while running 2 businesses, which I'm pretty much I have my business partner for one business, and then the other one's a family business, but I'm essentially the director of both of them. So, and we're both in a growth stage at the moment, which is exciting, but for anyone that works in their
time consuming.
For anyone that works in their own small business, you'll know that saying, I like, well, you'll mention it later, but I don't like wanky terms. Like you're always doing something though. Like you are just there's always something that needs to be done. Like we did a rebrand, we moved a distribution partner. We've had so many big things happen for both businesses in this period. And it was like, well, okay, that was a lot.
And so juggling all of this with the reno, obviously something had to give, and that's why it took so much longer.
Eventually the Reno took the back seat. So the businesses took the back seat for as long as I could make them take the back seat without nosediving my businesses. And then when it got to the point where I was like, okay, I really need to pull up on these, the renovation just stopped. And that was where I was super lucky, because obviously I used my savings.
What I was going to say about the FISO, like how much did it end up costing? Actually, so can I rewind that? What did you think it was going to cost to begin with, and what did it end up costing?
I was budgeting on 10. Best case scenario, blow out to 15.
Yep.
15 was supposedly my absolute drop dead number, and I
don't even know what you're about to say. What did it end up costing?
Somewhere between.
So I'm peeking across at the notepad now.
Somewhere in the realms of 15 to 20, and I can't tell you exactly because there was towards the end. It got to the point where I spent all of my money. I was like, "Hey, Bank of Mum and Dad, can I take out a small?" Like they do great interest rates, the Bank of Mum and Dad.
Yeah, but 0% still.
Yeah, and really flexible repayment term. But yeah, so I ended up there was a few, again, it was the annoying little things at the end, like the robe, the cupboard in the main bedroom was disgusting, the one that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oh, do I leave this here and try and paint it? Like it didn't matter if you put this pig in a dress, like you walked in, you're like, oh, there's a pig in the corner.
Yeah.
And it's wearing a dress. That's weird. Or do you rip it out and spend $700 on a flat pack one from Bunnings, which I ended up doing? But it's like, oh, cool. Like and by the time you've, $700 is $1,000 by the time you've done all the other little bits and pieces. It's like, great.
Well, so let's I guess round it up to more like $20,000.
Well, I actually wrote a rough breakdown. So it was, I've written approximately 20, but that was a breakdown. It was about $6,000 in the bathroom.
Okay.
$5,000 in the kitchen and main. It's open plan as what you've seen it. It's an open plan living area. So $5,000 roughly.
Can we talk about how you made open plan as well? But keep going. So $5,000 roughly.
$5,000 roughly on that. There was at least $2,000 worth of tools. So that you can probably detract that from the actual figure. I still money that I spent, but it's on tools to do the job, which I'll keep to do other jobs.
I write those off unless it's still coming out of your pocket. So yes, you need to count it, but it's different because it's not a consumable unless it's rented tools. Like you did the floor, didn't you?
Oh yeah, but that's the floor sander.
It's like $60 or something for the day.
Call it 100. To round for the edger as well. Yeah. So that one. Most of the stuff I bought are useful tools that I will use to do other jobs anyway. So you take that off of the 20-ish grand. It's somewhere in the mid to high teens.
Okay, so like $18,000,
somewhere around there. That's full new kitchen, new bathroom, new laundry, water ceiling tiles,
and just in case
floor to ceiling,
wall to ceiling. Floor to ceiling tiles, but just in case you guys actually wanting to take a look at this as well yourself, like go to the Pizza and Property Facebook page because we're going to be having a few before and afters. We've got all the after photos. Please tell me you have some before so I can actually put these together. Yeah, good. Okay, we're going to have all the before and after photos up there so you can actually see what James has done. And do you mind if we actually unpack a little bit about the bathroom? Because that to me, I've done bathrooms, but I've never done an entire bathroom myself. Like James, 100%, apart from the plumber.
I had a plumber to do underfloor plumbing.
Otherwise, 100%, like did all the tiling, did the screeding, did the waterproofing.
And had a friend who's a builder help me pour the concrete slab.
Okay, can you talk us through that a little bit because that's a ballsy move.
Okay, so essentially what happened was we started and then it was too late for anything to how you hit that point where it's like, if you're just going to knock the wall, we could have got
the point of no return.
The point of no return. I knocked the walls out. So there was a wall in the main lounge room kitchen. So I will get to the bathroom, but there was a wall there. That one was easy enough. So that one we were going to knock out either way. It wasn't load bearing. We did have to put a couple of beams up there to hold the ceiling up because obviously there's a gap where the wall used to be.
You got photos of this as well that I can post?
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah, cool.
So we knocked that out. That wasn't too big a deal. That was basically just a couple holes to patch up. Then where the bathroom was, we knocked that out to extend it because there was a corridor, typical old build. Like there was just a corridor that went to a cupboard, which had the electricity box in it. Actually, that was another $1,000. So that I got an electrician to move. So again, it's part of the renovation cost, but to me, that was probably the most expensive.
That's definitely part of the cost. Yeah. Because that's not something that you then keep. And that's $1,000 to move that. But then you opened up the bathroom by another, square meter, 2 square meters?
Yeah, it would have been 2 square meters, I reckon, because the shower is about a square meter and the shower is in where that came from.
Which doesn't sound like much, but when we're talking a unit, every square meter counts.
Yeah. And when to look at it now, like the unit next door
looks awesome.
Yeah, well, we'll touch on it later, but the unit next door did a reno. He didn't knock that wall out. And it's amazing how much smaller, I did a walkthrough when it sold and I was like, oh wow, I'm so glad I knocked that wall out.
Yeah.
Because it was a useless corridor with a cupboard in it. And now you open the door and you've got this big freestanding bath, shower, toilet, the whole shebang.
It's the best knocking walls out. I actually just reposted that video the other day. That was fun.
I did laugh at that.
Sorry, on the bathroom.
So we got to the point where we were going to take the tiles up. By this point, I'd had a tiler sort of arranged, but there was a rigmarole there. And again, looking back now, the tiler said to me, he's like, I can't work to your time frame. I can't work to your budget that we'd spoken about previous. Because then when he came and looked at the job, and I told him I wanted to do it in 2 to 3 weeks. He just said I can't, that's not possible, which for me at the time was heartbreaking. But then it was like, well, I've already knocked these walls out. I've started ripping up stuff. It's a bit late to there's no point crying over spilt milk. We're just going to have to work out how to do this. So luckily, I had you, who, while you're not a tiler, you're a fairly handy person in the renovation space. The next door neighbor is a retired builder. My next door neighbor is a current builder. So I was just constantly hey, Roland, what's this thing? Or how do I do this? And YouTube and those 2 guys were my best friends for the process because I'd do what looked like it made sense based on the YouTube video. And then if I got stuck, I'd ring one of them and be like, hey, I've done this. Now it happens. But
I feel like I need to chuck a quick disclaimer in here here that we're not talking about doing anything that you can kill yourself with. I always say this on the podcast. Okay. So
I did electrocute myself though.
Okay, this is perfectly to my point. Okay, so if there's something that you can genuinely hurt yourself with, and I really mean this as a disclaimer, do not do it. Okay, pay someone else to get in there and do stuff properly for you. But the thing that I love about what James is saying now is that you got to a point where I bet you that proper sick in your stomach feeling kicked in when the Tyler was like, sorry, mate, can't do it anymore. But then it's like, okay, what can we control? What can I do?
Yeah.
Who do I know? Where can I find out information? How do I actually pull this together?
Yeah.
And just jumped on it and made it happen.
Yeah, it was too far gone. Like I'd already started ripping up the floor. So then like ripping up the floor, there was stuff I still remember now, like the next door neighbor telling me things and me being like, oh yeah, like pretending I knew what he was talking about, like subfloor and strip footings.
You're like, yeah, I remember playing the subfloor category in Mortal Kombat right next to Sub-Zero.
Yeah, exactly. And then it wasn't until I actually did it that I'm like, oh, that's what he's talking about. So those old houses don't have a concrete slab in the, like what this one probably, well, actually this probably does have a strip, but
this is 100 years old. This wouldn't.
Yeah. So modern houses now, they pour one solid slab and then they build on top of it. Whereas these old units, they had poured like strips of concrete and then built framework on top of those strips of concrete. So when you knocked out bits of the floor in the bathroom, once you got through the concrete subfloor, it was just dirt. Like there was sand, there was big 500 mil thick slabs of concrete running one way, but in between them was just dirt with like sand and bricks. And
can you describe that feeling, seeing that for the first time?
I was just like, that's what he's talking about, strip footings. I was just pretending to understand. Like literally, if you had the floor level here, your floorboards in the house, there was almost to my waist deep, like in the bits in between the concrete there, I could stand and I was almost waist height to where the floorboards were.
That's
so there was
nuts.
there's so much rubbish under those floors. When you're doing the reno and you're like, oh, rubbish, just like you understand why when you look in between the strip footings,
there's old newspapers
old bits of bricks and shit and like an old Benson and Hedges pack of Benson and Hedges cigarettes. That's like, I've still got it in the house somewhere. I dated it back to like the 60s, like late 50s, early 60s, because the branding on the Benson and Hedges packet, they changed from the symbol and to the word and in like
ampersand to and.
That'll do.
Yeah.
They switched that in. I found it on Google and I was like, oh shit, like it's a legitimately like how long ago is that? 60s?
60. Well, that's 80 years ago.
Yeah.
No, hold on, that's not right. 60 years ago.
Yeah. I'm just like, no, idiot. Math. Me good math. Come to me for real maths related needs.
All right. So you ripped out the floor. You're standing in dirt. It's waist high to you. You're naturally feeling a bit nervous. Again, you push past everything. Like confidence wise, was just like, I'm surrounding myself with these two people that I know are builders, really understand this through and through. YouTube, what else sort of got you through it and made you go, yep, I can do this. I can pull it off. What were the highs? What were the lows?
I think pouring the slab, like getting the underfloor plumbing done was good. So I had this was one of the few things I got trades in to do because it was going under the concrete slab. I was like, like disclaimer, you'd probably have to pay a professional to do it. I'm confident I maybe could have done it, but I didn't know, which U-traps and bends and shit needed to be used. So I got a mate of mine who is a plumber to come in and just do a friend's job for me.
Yeah.
So I did it worked well for him. I did all the shitty digging and he just came in and put the pipes where they needed to go and then sort of moved a few piles of dirt around. And then when my neighbor came and helped me pour the slab for the bathroom, that was when that was the first time I was like, oh, thank God. Like I've got underfloor plumbing and a slab. Like the room looked disgusting because all of the tiles I'd pulled off had no water, like they wouldn't have had waterproofing on them. So yeah, it had just been let go for a long time. The water had been getting in behind the tiles, which had let all the render fall off basically. So when I was taking the tiles off the walls, I was taking chunks of plaster off the walls with it and exposing bare brick. And I was like, this is why the tiler said that he couldn't do it in 2 weeks, because that is a whole nother process. So before I even got to think about screeding, I had to re-mud all the walls. And so we had to chase pipes for where the plumbing was going. So the plumber could do that. So once that was done, I then re-mudded everything. Then you've got to let it dry. Then we poured the slab. Then you've got to let that dry.
Is that a lot of what blew the timeline out then as well? Is all of the waiting in between and
yeah. At the beginning, it would have been like, and again, it depends who you listen to. If you talk to a professional concrete company, they'll tell you that you've got to wait 28 days for the slab to cure before you tile on it. But then if you talk to any builder that I spoke to, they're all like, it's a week to 2 weeks, and you're in there doing stuff. So I think I still ended up, by sheer accident, it ended up taking me 2 to 3 weeks before I started thinking about screeding anyway. So it sort of didn't matter.
So it had that kind of curing time, even if the other guy was right.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's because it's a chemical reaction, it's not drying because of air. It's a chemical reaction happening. Apparently, that's what everyone kept telling me. Chemical reaction. So yeah, once we had that down, then I had to work out how to screed. And this seems to be the bit that everybody gets really worried about, because it's the, I think it's the boogeyman that professionals tell DIYers about, so that they're too scared to do it themselves. And they're going to, again, full disclosure, not a tradesperson, but watched hours of YouTube videos, spoke to a few people that have done it, and it's like, oh, okay, so basically all you're doing is changing the level of the floor so that if you spill water on it, it will run towards the drain. So my bathroom beforehand didn't have a floor waste anyway. It just had the waste in the shower. So we put a center floor waste in, and then we put a floor waste for the shower in. So you have to do 2 screeds. One is for the shower. So the shower needs to be a bit more aggressive because it's a smaller space and it's going to be used and wet all the time. So you want that water running down the drain. Whereas the main bathroom for the center waste, like at the end of the day, like if the bath overflows and floods, you just need it to be enough that it's going to find its way to that drain. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be quite as aggressive. And I just used wedges. So I actually, the technique I used was I measured from the center of the floor waste to the corner of each point of where I was making the floor, and then worked out my degrees. I think it was something like 5 degrees or 7 degrees for every meter or something. Don't quote me, Google it. And then I cut wedges. So, 10 centimeters at one point, 2 centimeters at the other, dump all the mud in, and then use a massive straight edge to just smooth it all over. And you create this running down to the drain.
Like the channel.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Then you take the wedges out and just fill the channels in. Once it dries, you pull the wedges out and just fill them with mortar. And then, you waterproof over the top of that tile.
One of the biggest reasons I wanted to get you on here is because when we did the 100th episode, I had an overwhelmingly popular response for when people could actually vote for the Australia's favorite pizza, which thank you for everyone that actually voted as well. Meat Lovers is apparently your favorite pizza, Australia. So thank you. As a vegetarian, I'm not as keen on that, but
I'm a meat eater and it's still not my favorite.
But what I was going to say though is everyone, well, not everyone, but I think it was about 50-60% said investors' personal stories. That's what we want to hear more of.
Yeah.
And this is why I really wanted to open this up with you, because everything that James is saying to me isn't, I've been doing this 20 years, 50 years, whatever, got all this experience. I had no idea what I was doing. I was scared out of my brain for certain parts of it.
Yeah.
And terrified with this, but you still just kept making it work.
Yeah.
Kept making it happen. Now, with that said as well, benefit of hindsight, 2020, what would you have actually done differently in this project now if you were going to take on another one, knowing what you know now?
First thing would be definitely better understand the time frame that it's going to take to do it, because that will change the way you go about it, basically. So
how far or how much would you have allowed now? Would you have allowed the whole 4 or 5 months? Or do you think it wouldn't take you that long now because you know more?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So if I had to do the same project again now, I could comfortably do it in probably 8 to 10 weeks, I reckon, because I've got the tools and I've got the knowledge to do that job again. I could have done it in 3.5, 4 months, maybe.
Okay.
If I'd known that's what I was going to, but if I'd known it was going to take me 3.5 to 4 months, I probably wouldn't have done it, because it's too long to take out of running 2 bit. I would have had to have a different contingency in place to run the businesses. That's where the biggest fall down for me was, if I don't tend to my businesses now, it doesn't matter how well this renovation goes, because my businesses will have nosedived.
This is going to sound mean, but it's meant as a compliment. And it was actually one of the boys skydiving, because James and I used to skydive together. Actually, we got our licenses together. And I remember someone talking about it's the balance between stupid and smart. If you're too smart with something, sometimes you just see every single risk
and just not do it.
Exactly. Yeah. But then if you're too stupid, you'll mess it up and balls it, and all of a sudden you're in a world of pain. But if you've got this nice balance between, actually stupid's not the word, I think it's almost a naivety, then you're like, we could do that. But I think it's necessary, because like you said,
100%.
If you had have actually gone, oh wow, this is going to take me 5 months, you wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And we're about to get into the numbers of how much James has actually profited out of this, and bloody hell, I bet you're glad you've done it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
well, and speaking of which, actually, why don't we jump into, actually, no, beforehand, just before we get into that.
I had one other thing for 2020.
Yeah, go for it.
So better understanding the time frame is one, and like delegating. So there was a point in this reno where my next door neighbor said, pay me $3,000 and me and my employee will finish this in a week. And I was like, nah. Like hindsight.
Finish what, the bathroom?
It was like, no. It was, trying to think now. I only thought about it the other day. I'm like, oh, that was actually like, he was doing me a favor.
Yeah.
But it was like corner.
It was $3,000 to you at the time, and you're like,
and I was like, oh, it's $3,000, but I probably spent $3,000 over the last 6 weeks doing things myself anyway, and he would have had it done a month and a half ago.
Okay,
potentially. Right. He also like it was one of those. He would have done it, but he's working himself in a completely different story. But yeah, he's got more work than he can deal with at the moment anyway. So I probably, while he was doing me a favor, he probably would have taken a few years off his life, adding to his stress.
So benefit of hindsight then for that point is don't be afraid to actually leverage other people's skills a little bit, lean on it a bit more. Don't DIY the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, or again, like if I'd known in advance, like you can budget for it. So if I was like, oh, actually, it's worth me spending that $3,000 for those jobs to be done. Because I did them, but I did them over the space of 6 weeks where they would have been done in a week.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not a week, but he said a week. It was probably going to be a couple.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else that's a big standout? Something to take away. If someone's listening to this going, oh, I'm really connecting with this. I'm about to reno something. I don't quite know what I'm doing. I want to get into it. What's another takeaway? If fine, if there's not. But
sticky note timeline. That was one of the most helpful things we did at the beginning.
That was good fun.
That was both helpful and it helped and it hindered to a degree because it was like, oh yeah, we'll just do this. Like everything makes sense. When you write things out on a sticky note timeline and you stick them on the wall, everything is just going to be like, oh yeah, like we'll do this and this and then that will happen and it'll all just get done. And as soon as you start doing it, and especially with old houses, brick houses, like listen to me when I tell you this, nothing will get done as quickly as you think it is going to.
Even just come down to like chasing pipe.
Don't get me started on chasing pipe.
Just in case you're wondering, like, what the hell is chasing pipe? Just quickly Google chasing pipe house reno.
I can tell you what chasing pipe is.
Okay, all right.
It's the most painful part of a brick renovation job you'll ever have to do. And I was using a couple of $1,000 brick
saw.
chasing tool.
Oh, okay.
Not just a brick saw. Like I got one from the electrician actually. Yeah. He lent me his brick chasing tool because he doesn't use it very often. And even that, like there's dust it is just a horrible, thankless job.
Okay. So if you're looking at buying a reno property, and you would obviously recommend then that if you've got a choice between solid brick and something that is like brick normal, veneer.
Yeah, brick veneer, like frame, like plasterboard and frame. Yep. Plasterboard and frame all day long.
Okay. All right. I reckon
because you know what? If you pull off a bit of plasterboard and you got rot in your frame behind, you can just nail some more bits of wood onto it and it's all good.
It's pretty straightforward.
If you pull your tiles off and it rips all the plaster off, you've got no choice. No, you got no choice but to remud the wall.
Oh, I thought you meant pulling the plasterboard off.
That's easy.
Okay, yeah.
That's easy. Like I'm talking about the render that they use in old houses. Oh, because you always think like, well, I did. I was like, oh yeah, it's just brick. Like it's just brick, like painted over or something. I guess it's not. It is not. There is a whole process that goes into plastering. My OCD plastering I find oddly enjoyable, infuriating but enjoyable because I'm a perfectionist. Like I spent a lot of time getting things.
It's like cake decorating, isn't it?
Yeah, but with sand and cement.
It doesn't taste as sweet.
Yeah, it's horrible coming out the other side.
Oh, well, the opposite to horrible. Right now, you're about to let it out. So you haven't let it out just yet, but you've got quotes from the property manager.
Yep.
Okay. And what are we talking rent return? Where were you to begin with?
So I was getting $295 a week.
Okay.
And it's advertised for $395 a week.
So you've increased it by $100 now
a week. Yeah.
Per week. Okay. So it's $5,200 a year as far as just your cash flow we're talking increase. Yeah. And you spent roughly $18,000 on it. So even if we just measure it on the cash flow return, then what's that, like roughly a 25% return? Like you're going to make your money back in 4 years just from the cash flow side.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
You're the property guy.
Okay. And then as far as the actual capital is concerned, now James hasn't had this value, just full disclosure. Bank value hasn't been around there, but the one good thing about this is it's only a block of 4, and one of them that is renovated to, in my opinion and professional opinion, not to the higher standard as James. It's still lovely, looks really nice, but James's has been done genuinely to a higher standard, has just sold, and that has just sold for
403.5 or something. 405 grand, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I think it was just a touch under. I thought it was 407.
I think it was something and a half. It was like 403.5 or 405.5, something weird.
Let's even call it 4. Even just be generous and say somebody came in the building inspection and they renegotiated. So even if it was $400,000, what did you end up paying for this in the beginning? We're talking going back to what, 2015?
2015, I paid, we just looked at it, $275.
So we get $275,000. You spent let's even call it $20,000, but it's just under $20,000. So you've got, what is that then? $295?
Yeah.
Plus then we've just got a reval. Let's say it's going to come in around $400,000, which is probably even conservative considering you've done a better job again, in my opinion. So that could potentially come in at 410, 420.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, what is that? Roughly around $110,000 equity uplift. Now, all of that is not usable equity. Obviously, some of that
and to be fair, that's what I bought. So that's the equity based on just what I bought it for versus what it's worth now. But when we were looking at it, it was like, and this was probably a part of, in the background, this is a part of the reason I ended up doing what I did, was because looking at it in the state it was in, rental return was not going to be much better. To tart it up, I think you were saying like you might get early threes for it.
My only concern, and this is why in the early days when we very first talked about this, when we're at that food and fodder or whatever it was called, okay?
Yes, yeah.
It was around, that's the one. Great cafe if you're in Adelaide, around Brooklyn Park sort of area. No, not Brooklyn Park, Crowder Park. But anyway, I digress. If you weren't going to pull the equity out, and this is something that you want to consider as well if you're listening to this, because if James wasn't going to pull out any equity, wasn't going to give the release back to his parents as far as the guarantor was concerned, then spending the $15,000, $20,000 to me was just making a lovely home for the tenant and increasing the value. But like, what for? Because if you were to do a tart up though, and we were going to spend more like sort of $3,000, then yes, you've increased the rent by $100. You probably could have increased the rent by maybe $50, $60, but it's only going to cost you $3 versus 20. But now you're actually tapping into that equity and actually pulling it out, which to me is the thing that's like that's the win.
And I don't think at $3,000, that's hoping for the best plan. Like even a tart up at $3,000, I don't think you would have seen that significant an increase. That if you go from 295 to get a 50 to 60%.
I reckon you would see the last time we went through that, how much it stank. I really think just with a paint and a simple sort of like cleanup, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, but
when the property manager first came and looked at it, like in the first throes of it, she was talking she was like, you'll get mid threes for this to like rent it out. She'd like looked at next door. Next doors was renting for I think it was like 370. Yeah. And his was renovated at that time. So I sort of looked at that and I'm like, oh, well, like if he's done it to that standard, that's going to get 370. Like I'm not going to be able to dress mine well enough to get anywhere, like to get near that. Whereas it was like, well, actually, if I do this properly, I can potentially get almost 400. And we'll see. Well, like, it's on the market now and pets are negotiable.
Yeah. You secure it, man.
That's what I was saying. And I figured like everyone I'm talking to it's a hard market for rentals at the moment. So
yeah, absolutely.
2Ks from the city.
And you're using Prue, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. That was she's on my list of things if I wanted to mention. Like question 6, my answer is just Prue.
What was question 6? Oh, is there anything that you wanted to disclose about the rental process? So Prue.
Yeah, do yourself a favor. This is from someone who's been in sales for his whole life and is a salesman. She I didn't stand a chance. Well, I did, and it was right down to the death knock because I was potentially going to rent it out to the next door neighbors because next door was selling, but they wanted somewhere with an extra bedroom. And I said to Prue pretty early on, I'm like,
just for anyone wondering, Prue, what are you guys talking about? Is this some kind of insight?
Prue Muirhead.
Yeah, Prue Muirhead from Muirhead Property Management. She's a regular on the show. She's been on here many times before. She was one Investor of the Year back in 2009. Very much an accomplished property investor and property manager. Just to give some context to this.
Yeah, and she, I forget where I was going with it now, but yeah, I told her fairly early on. I was like, if I don't manage this myself, you've got it, because she was doing the whole, like, she was following me up, but she wasn't selling.
Pushy.
And there's nothing. I spoke to you about this the other day with a different conversation, but social media marketing guy was like, you could tell he was following the steps to a road to a sale.
Yeah,
and I was just sitting there, I'm like, yeah, bro. Like,
I'm going to ask you a tie down question. Then I'm going to ask you a closing question.
Yeah. And we just I just threw him off because I talk nonsense.
Yeah.
And people can't deal with it because I don't say the things that so it's upset managers for as long as time. But
this is why it's best that you work for yourself.
Yeah. Now I just annoy myself. But yeah, she is fantastic. And yeah, she came through and looked at it. She's like, yeah, I think you're going to get high threes for this. We'll put it on at 395, especially because pets are obviously a thing that people.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you haven't actually renovated this, if you had have just said, Todd, I'm not touching it, I want to put it on the market. The big thing as well is we have gone through a lot of capital growth in Adelaide.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't been following the markets, they're just on fire.
Ridiculous.
Like it's stupidity on top of stupidity. Realistically, even if you were to list that right now unrenovated, if you hadn't done anything, you'd probably still be looking at offers in those kind of low to maybe even mid threes.
Yeah, wow.
So the fact that you've added that extra value, we're still talking like over 50,000K uplift.
Yeah.
So it's still big dollars.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, awesome, man. All right. Is there anything else? Oh, and I do actually just want to point out as well, Prue is not a paid sponsor of the show. James is just saying this, and I say it as well because
you can even look question 6. The answer is Prue. Wherever,
the
whichever camera is looking.
You can put
at
it in
me.
that camera if you want. That's the top down
Question
shot.
6, Prue. I wasn't lying. I was like, yeah, if you're looking to rent a property out, I assume she only works in Adelaide.
Yeah, she doesn't work interstate.
Yeah, you will do yourself a disservice to go anywhere else.
Okay. All right. Before we turn this into completely the Prue commercial.
Yeah. Also, Prue, I want a better rate. Prue, if you're listening, I want a discount.
All right, man. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. As far as like anything else that you'd like to wrap up, if someone's looking at taking on a project, they're a little bit green, they've got a bit of experience because this isn't like completely your first rodeo, but it kind of was your first solo.
First with it being just like my head, my money, my.
What would you say to anyone that's in a similar situation?
Well, not even just for I gave this question some thought. So not even just from a renovating point of view. There are two. One is again not only renovation specific, but fairly specific. The other one is probably said by someone famous, but it's probably written here somewhere. Let me just have a quick check. No, I've definitely seen it written on a wall somewhere around you. But one is, there is no try. There is only do or do not.
I like it.
If I'd tried, I wasn't able to try and learn to tile. It was either I learned how to tile the bathroom or the bathroom didn't get tiled.
Yep.
And do it right, do it once. The amount and again, I was pretty lucky because I worked that out early on, but there was a few times early on where I'm like, oh yeah, but just do this little little tricky bit. Just don't do it, do a bit of a dodge job. And that's how I electrocuted myself. I gave myself a real kick one day, which wasn't much fun. But yeah, do it once, do it right, do it right, do it once.
Okay, awesome. Well, James, I think we've got to the most important question of the entire show, and you and I are about to go out for dinner now. So I need to ask you
because going out for dinner.
Or whatever, we're getting it. But either way, you're getting pizza for dinner. So I need to ask James Rodriguez, what is your favorite pizza?
A Supreme with anchovies.
Why anchovies? They're
disgusting. I love anchovies. They just add like a delicious little bit of salty.
Literally tastes like cat food.
Why are you eating cat food?
I don't know. I was 9 and I was curious.
But yeah, 100%. Like I like something with literally everything on it.
Okay.
And anchovies is also good because a lot of people don't like them. So if you get them, people don't eat your pizza.
Yeah, I used to have that when I was vegan. When actually this is when you and I lived together.
Nobody wanted to be friends with you or eat with you.
No one wanted to eat the vegan cheese.
Or have anything to do with the vegan. Oh, dear.
Oh, mate. Look, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really do appreciate you taking the time out to come on the show, bud. All right. And just in case, if you are watching this on the video podcast and wondering, James and I are not drinking beers. All right. And one thing I would just personally like to do for James as well, if you guys are wondering what we're drinking, if you're seeing this on the video podcast, I always refer to James as a drink manufacturer, but I fluff things up a little. Manufacturer and distributor. And it's Dirty Clean Eats turmeric tonic, which I think is wonderful. Go to dirtycleaneats.com if you want to check it out if you're into your healthy drinks. But yeah, man, I love what you do, and I'm absolutely so happy that you've come on the show and shared your story with us, mate. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time, man. Have a great rest of the week.
Let's go get some pizza.
I love that we get to talk to people that just know real estate like the back of their hand. We can learn so much from people that have been in the industry for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and that have done like hundreds of transactions. But the thing that I really like to learn from people like James is that you don't need to actually have done hundreds of transactions to be successful. Like, is James a superstar that's done this a million times? No, he's not. If he was sitting right next to me now, he's actually left now, he'd be like, well, I'm a superstar in other ways. And yeah, you are. But in terms of real estate, that's what I respect so much about this man. And anyone else that wants to do exactly the same thing is just going, all right, how do we do this? yeah, okay, I can do that. And then doing it. It's the doing it bit that has made this man such a large chunk of money that is going to completely change things for him. And the options that he's now got in front of him now, just that they weren't even options 12 months ago. They were, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. That'd be nice. Now it's like, oh, wow, I can actually do this, which I just think is absolutely incredible. And I love the fact that even when he had the obstacles put in front of him, like with the tiling, that bathroom, that was a big challenge for him. And he'd never done it before, but just working your way through it. If you're in a situation like this, like we always say as well, none of this is ever financial advice. Please seek independent professional financial advice, but make sure, like if you're looking at your home right now, your investment property going, yeah, maybe I could do it. Start checking out what would it take? What would you need to do? What could you do? What skilled trades would you need to get in to actually get this done properly as well? Because you don't just want to half-ass it and end up making yourself a bigger problem than you actually just solved. But it's about asking the question, talking to trades and figuring out what can actually be done, because maybe, just maybe, you're actually already sitting on or potentially looking at on realestate.com a deal that actually has a whole nother 50 grand, 100 grand sitting in it that could actually get you to the next one again. And that to me is the whole power in this, being able to add value. I just think that's an incredible thing that we have at our advantage or at hand as property investors a lot of the time when things are put together properly. Don't confuse this with just renovate anything and make money, because that's also not how it works. But if you can do this properly, you can get spring-folded to a whole nother level. But as always, guys, I better wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Todd Sloan. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you go on iTunes, scroll down to the bottom, leave us a review. I'd love it if it's a 5-star, but tell us your thoughts. We want to keep bringing you the best real estate content in the country, guys. And if you've listened to this episode and thought, yeah, I could reno, I could do this, I think maybe I don't have two left hands. I mean, even if you want to project manage, it doesn't matter if you do have two left hands. But right now, if you're struggling to buy something in this market, which pretty much everyone is, check out InvestorKit.com.au. Support the guys that are actually supporting the show. Adrian's jumping on here all the time. And I got to say, I believe in what these people do. I actually get asked to be a sponsor, well, not to be a sponsor, to be on as a sponsor all the time. And the amount of people I've said, look, thanks, but no thanks, this isn't quite a fit. I genuinely believe in the guy. So if you're looking for a buyer's agent, I got to say, I'm happy to actually point people in this direction because I know the guy does a bloody good job. So check him out, InvestorKit.com.au. Support the guys that are supporting the show and keeping this going. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. As always, my name is Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast. Have yourself an amazing rest of the week and stay awesome.